My name is Ethan, and this is a story I never imagined myself telling. It's not just about the end of a marriage. It's about losing a part of myself, the part that once believed love could survive anything. But before I get ahead of myself, let's start from the beginning. I met Lauren years ago at a startup summit. It was one of those events where entrepreneurs and professionals gather to share ideas, make connections, and hopefully find new opportunities. Attending wasn't even on my agenda that day. I had a pile of work waiting for me, and to be honest, I never cared much for standing in a crowded room, exchanging small talk with strangers. But for some reason, I decided to go. That single choice set everything in motion. Lauren and I met during a discussion about business scalability. She stood out, driven, full of energy, and carrying a kind of confidence I found captivating. She was in the early stages of launching her business, but there were clear gaps in her strategy. Gaps that I noticed right away. We started talking, and what began as a casual conversation quickly turned into an in-depth discussion about business models, securing funding, and the struggles of building something from the ground up. She asked sharp, insightful questions, and I had the answers she needed. In that moment, it was nothing more than two professionals exchanging knowledge. By the time the summit ended, we had exchanged contact information. She wanted to stay in touch, to reach out whenever she needed guidance. I didn't think much of it at the time. To me, she was just another connection in the business world. But looking back, that moment was the first step toward everything that followed. In the beginning, our conversations were strictly professional. She'd call me for advice, how to structure her pricing, attract investors, or handle difficult clients. I always had something useful to share, and she always seemed genuinely appreciative. There was something satisfying about helping someone so determined to succeed. Over time, those calls became more frequent. Eventually, they drifted beyond business. We started discussing life, our ambitions, our struggles, the things that kept us up at night. What started as professional chats turned into coffee meetups, then lunch meetings, then late-night conversations that had nothing to do with market trends or business plans. I got to see a different side of Lauren, the playful side, the one with a sharp sense of humor that caught me off guard. Before I even realized it, those moments became the best part of my day. Then one afternoon, over coffee, she pitched an idea. She wanted me to join her company. At first, I wasn't sure. I was doing fine as a consultant, taking on projects as they came, but Lauren made a compelling argument. She needed someone she could trust, someone who understood her vision as deeply as she did. She offered a solid salary, great benefits, and, most importantly, the opportunity to help build something meaningful. It wasn't a decision I made lightly. I knew mixing work with personal relationships could be risky, but in the end, I agreed. The first 2 months at her company were intense. I worked hard, not just as Lauren's advisor, but as someone actively making things happen. I kept a low profile, letting her take center stage as the face of the company, while I focused on refining operations, solving problems, and ensuring everything ran smoothly. It didn't take long to realize our connection had evolved beyond just business. Late nights at the office turned into lingering looks, and before we knew it, we weren't just colleagues anymore. We became a couple. Less than a year after I joined the company, we got married. It felt like the perfect partnership in both life and business. We were a team. She led from the front while I worked behind the scenes, making key decisions from the shadows. I never minded that she was the CEO, the face of the company, the one people admired. My role was different but equally important. And for the first 5 years, it worked. The business flourished. Our marriage felt solid. We were building something special both at work and at home. Or at least that's what I believed at the time. Then we hired Tyler. Back then, he was just another name on the payroll to me. At first, I barely paid him any attention. He had a knack for dodging accountability, turning excuses into justifications, and looking busy without actually doing much. I assumed he wouldn't last. In a company like ours, results mattered, and people like Tyler usually weeded themselves out when they couldn't keep up. But I was wrong. Instead of being held accountable, Tyler thrived, not because of his skills or work ethic, but because Lauren made sure he never faced the consequences of his failures. First, I brushed it off. Everyone needs time to adjust, right? But after a while, it became impossible to ignore. Tyler repeatedly missed deadlines, botched reports, and showed up late, yet Lauren always covered for him. If someone pointed out his mistakes, she'd downplay them, shift the blame, or act as if they weren't a big deal. The same woman who once prided herself on running a tight ship was suddenly letting things slide, but only when it came to Tyler. It didn't sit right with me, and it wasn't just about work. I started noticing how much time they spent together. Their lunch breaks stretched into hours. She insisted Tyler drive her places. There were private meetings in her office with no clear agenda. I wasn't the only one who noticed. The office had started buzzing with quiet murmurs. I'd catch coworkers exchanging subtle glances, whispering in hushed voices when they thought I was out of earshot. I wasn't the kind of man to jump to conclusions. I wanted to trust my wife. But the more I pieced things together, the harder it became to ignore the picture forming in front of me. So one night, after we got home, I decided to ask her a simple question. Nothing accusatory, just straightforward. "What's going on with Tyler?" The way she reacted told me everything I needed to know. Instead of giving me a direct answer, she instantly went on the defensive. Her expression hardened. Her tone turned sharp. "Oh, so now you're jealous?" she snapped, as if I had accused her of something outrageous. I hadn't even brought up the rumors yet. All I'd asked about was his work performance, why she kept covering for him. But within seconds, she had twisted the conversation, making me out to be the unreasonable one just for asking. After that, talking to her about Tyler became impossible. The moment I so much as mentioned his name, she'd roll her eyes, sigh dramatically, or flat out ignore me. If I pushed, she'd accuse me of being paranoid, insecure, or trying to control her decisions. It was like a switch had flipped. The same woman who used to value my thoughts, who once sought my advice on nearly everything, now acted as if my concerns weren't worth her time. That's when it hit me. At some point, my wife had stopped respecting me, and I had no idea how to fix it. Then came the so-called business trips, and things became even harder to overlook. First, they seemed normal. Lauren was the CEO, after all, and travel was part of the job. But I knew our industry inside and out. The deals she claimed required her to be there in person. Most of them could have been handled over the phone or through email, just like we had always done before. Yet suddenly she was packing her bags almost every other week, insisting she needed to be there in person for meetings that never used to require travel. That alone was strange. But what made it worse? She was always taking Tyler with her. There was no logical reason for him to be the one traveling at her side instead of me. Her husband, her business partner, one of the company's top decision-makers. But any time I questioned it, she had a quick excuse ready. "Oh, Tyler helps me with scheduling." Or, "You want to replace him?" The more these trips happened, the more uneasy I became. The timing always seemed suspicious. Some trips were announced last minute, leaving me no room to ask questions. Others would start on a Thursday, only for her to conveniently extend them through the weekend. Business trips that somehow included extra downtime. And it wasn't just me noticing anymore. I could feel it in the office. The whispers weren't just about speculation. They were laced with pity. People weren't just talking behind my back. They were looking at me like I was the fool. Then, one night, after yet another one of these suspicious trips, I reached my breaking point. We had just gotten home from work, and she was acting like everything was perfectly normal. So I told her to sit down with me in the living room. She sighed, irritated, as if I was wasting her time. But she sat. I didn't sugarcoat it. "There are rumors going around about you and Tyler." She didn't even flinch. Without hesitation, she shrugged and said, "What do you want me to do about rumors?" Then she stood up and walked away. That was it. No denial. No effort to reassure me. Nothing. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just paranoia. My marriage was unraveling right in front of me. And then came the day everything finally fell apart. It was a Monday morning, and I had no idea that by the end of it, my marriage would be in ruins. The board meeting had just wrapped up. A routine discussion about projections for the next quarter and operational challenges. My head was still in work mode, focused on strategy. As everyone was packing up, I saw an opening to pull Lauren aside and discuss some of the concerns raised in the meeting. We stepped into her office, and she set her things down on her desk. I was just about to bring up the client strategy when she abruptly said, "Give me a second. I need to use the restroom." Without another word, she walked out, leaving her phone and files on the desk. Almost immediately after she left, her screen lit up. A message notification popped up. My eyes flicked to it instinctively, and what I saw sent a cold shock through me. It was from Tyler. "Damn, you look hot in that gown today. I'd love to give you flirty message with you still wearing it." For a few seconds, I just stood there, frozen. My wife was sleeping with this man. The same man she had accused me of being jealous of. The same man she had defended over and over again. She hadn't just chosen him over me at work. She had chosen him in our marriage, in our bed. A wave of fury surged through me, but something inside held me back from an immediate reaction. Maybe it was the stark, undeniable truth staring me in the face. There was no need for a confrontation. Nothing she said could erase what I had just seen. With shaky hands, I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture of the message. I knew her too well. If I confronted her without proof, she'd twist the story, turn it on me, make me question my own eyes. She'd say it was a joke, that I was overreacting, that I was being insecure. I wasn't going to give her that chance. I slid my phone back into my pocket, turned around, and walked straight out of her office. I didn't wait for her to come back. I knew if I had to look her in the eye at that moment, I wouldn't be able to hold back. That afternoon I was on edge, but I kept it together. I went through the motions, burying myself in work like nothing had changed. I focused on my tasks, trying to keep my mind from spiraling. Then a message came in. One of our clients was raising concerns about delays. As the operations lead, I already knew where the bottleneck was. The problem was Tyler. He had missed deadlines, failed to communicate, and made mistakes that cost us both time and money. So I did what I was supposed to do. I pointed it out, clear, professional, and direct. But before Tyler could even open his mouth to explain himself, Lauren jumped in. She didn't just defend him. She went after me. The entire room fell silent. I glanced around and saw my colleagues shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Nobody wanted to challenge the CEO, especially not when she was shielding her favorite employee. Tyler leaned back in his chair, looking smug. He didn't even need to defend himself anymore. Lauren was doing it for him. My wife, my own wife, was choosing another man over me openly in front of our entire team without a second thought. I could have fought back, but what was the point? I took a slow, steady breath, gave a small nod, and said, "Noted." Then I stood up and walked out of the room, straight to my office. I didn't hesitate. I sat down, opened my laptop, and started typing my resignation. I kept it simple. I am resigning from my position effective immediately. I am also ending our marriage. I know about your infidelity. I printed the letter, signed it, and took it directly to Lauren's office. She was at her desk when I placed it in front of her. She barely glanced at it before looking up at me, her face shifting from boredom to confusion. She opened her mouth like she was about to say something, but I didn't stick around to hear it. I turned and walked away. I didn't need to hear her excuses. I didn't need her to explain. That night, she came home to find me sitting in the living room. She walked in, dropped her bag by the door, and sighed, like she had just wrapped up an exhausting day. She glanced at me, trying to gauge my mood, then sat down across from me on the couch. "Ethan," she started, her voice calm but careful. "I think we need to talk." I didn't say a word. I just looked at her, waiting. She took my silence as her cue to start damage control. She went straight to denial. "I don't know what's gotten into you, but this thing about me and Tyler? It's ridiculous," she said, shaking her head. "It's just office gossip, and you're throwing everything away over rumors." Her tone was firm, like she was trying to convince both me and herself at the same time. Then she leaned forward, lowering her voice like she was offering me a way out. "You don't have to resign," she said. "We can fix this. Just stop listening to nonsense." I let her talk. I let her sit there and spin her story, pretending like I was the one making a mistake. And when she was done, I pulled out my phone, opened my gallery, and turned the screen toward her. The screenshot of Tyler's message was right there in full view. I looked her dead in the eye and asked, "So, did you get the flirty message?" Her mouth opened slightly, like she wanted to say something, but nothing came out. It was over and she knew it. She blinked a few times, probably scrambling for an excuse. But there was nothing she could say. The proof was right there, and I wasn't interested in hearing more of her lies. A long, tense silence stretched between us before she finally exhaled, defeated. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice quieter now. And just like that, the conversation shifted. She wasn't trying to convince me to stay anymore. She was trying to figure out how to cut her losses. I told her exactly what I wanted. Clean break. No dragged-out court battles. No endless negotiations. I wanted my share of the company. Half, to be exact. I had spent years helping to build that business. I wasn't about to walk away with nothing. She hesitated, weighing her options. But she didn't have many. A public scandal would ruin her, and she cared too much about her reputation to let that happen. So she agreed. I walked away with half of everything, and a few extra benefits to make sure I wasn't starting from scratch. And the first thing I did with my newfound power? I fired Tyler. It took nothing more than a termination notice to cut him loose from the company. But I didn't stop there. In our industry, connections matter. And I had plenty. A few calls, couple of emails. And within days, Tyler was blacklisted. Nobody would hire him. His little free ride on Lauren's favoritism train had officially come to a dead stop. Lauren and I barely spoke after that. We finalized the paperwork, signed the agreements, and went our separate ways. She still runs her half of the business, while I remain an owner from a distance. But one thing is clear, she isn't in control anymore. I am. Even after everything, though, I still find myself asking one question. Was it a mistake to work for my wife? Looking back, I realize how blind I was. When she first asked me to join her company, I took it as a sign of trust, a symbol of love. I thought we were building something together, a partnership in every sense. Marriage and business side by side. But what I failed to see was that there's a fine line between working with someone and working for someone. Especially when that someone is your spouse. Power changes people. The moment one person holds authority over the other, the balance shifts. And I was too in love to see it happening. I ignored the warning signs. I let my feelings cloud my judgment. And before I knew it, I had become an employee first, a husband second, and eventually just an afterthought. And then there's another question that lingers. Did I let love blind me to the dangers of power imbalance? I never thought Lauren would cheat, but maybe I should have expected something to go wrong. I assumed that because I was loyal, she would be too. That because I worked hard, I would be valued. But in the end, the moment she saw herself as the one in power, my worth to her started to shrink. I wasn't her partner anymore. I was just another piece of the business, something she could replace or push aside when it suited her. Love wasn't enough to protect me from that. And then there's the real question, the one that stays in my mind more than I'd like to admit. Did I go too easy on her? I walked away with half the company. I fired Tyler. I made sure he'd never work in this industry again. But was that enough? There were moments when I thought about taking more, about making sure Lauren felt the same level of humiliation and betrayal that I did. Maybe I should have taken everything. Maybe I should have dragged her name through the mud. But that's just my perspective. Maybe I handled it right. Maybe I didn't. What do you think? Should I have taken more? Should I have fought harder? Or did I handle it the right way? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. And with that, I'll wrap this up. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like.